Alrighty, welcome everyone. I'm Joya Goodrum, President and CEO of the McMinnville Chamber. I want to thank you all for joining us here today. We're going to be hearing from Patrick O'Connor with the Oregon Employment Department, and he's going to be telling us a little bit about the economics of the pandemic and how it has impacted our state and particularly our region, and also what the future could be looking like for us. I'm going to toss it over to Scott Cooper. He's got a quick presentation for you. Thanks all for being here, and take it away, Scott.
Thank you, Joya. I'm Scott Cooper. I'm the Executive Director for McMinnville Economic Development Partnership. And I know that, Patrick, I'm looking forward to this, and your background with the rainbow, that just tells me optimism. So that's what I expect out of that report. First of all, thank you to the Chamber Board, Joya, and staff for putting this together. I also want to recognize MEDP's staff who is on this call, Communications Coordinator Taylor Brisman. You can smile and wave, thank you. And our Program Manager, Heather Hadley Blank, is also on this call. So they are the brains behind the operation, and without them, nothing gets done. There's no doubt about that. Mike is shaking his head, he knows. I'm going to share my screen. I've got a really brief presentation here. It says I'm disabled. There we go. All right. MEDP's mission statement is to advance the strategies that respond to the needs of McMinnville's traded sector businesses. Those typically kind of cover manufacturing-based businesses, of which we have about 90 or so in our community. Our strategic goals, or these are areas of focus, is business retention and expansion. Business retention and expansion is a proactive approach to economic development designed to better understand the challenges and opportunities businesses in our communities face and connect them with what they need to succeed. BRNE also focuses on gathering feedback and insights on the overall business climate, which is aggregated and analyzed to identify trends. It's estimated that about 80% of new job creation comes from existing businesses. So existing businesses are very important to economic development and the work that we do. Workforce development. Talented people are definitely the engine of innovation. For cities to prosper in today's world, they must provide a high quantity of talented workers. The first and most important workforce goal for a city should be to develop and grow its workforce from within. Combining that method with external attraction efforts will really help continued success. Business attraction. The attraction of new business and investment is significant to all cities' economic vitality. New businesses and investment attraction to McMinnville is necessary to fill a gap in meeting the needs of residents, provide goods or services of our existing businesses or industries that they need to purchase, or complement a growing noticeable specialty that has developed. Innovation development. Cities and regions must provide the necessary support to create a strong, diversified business environment. New business formation or creation is a necessity of economic development. The programs and support mechanisms to assist new businesses, however, they vary greatly, quite a bit differently from those needed to assist existing businesses. It is important that we continually develop our entrepreneurial ecosystem. I don't want to say that it's been, that I've seen it all in this past year, because I don't want to challenge that notion. I think every time we think that we've seen it all, there's something else that has snuck up on us. So I'll just say that it's been interesting, to say the very least. However, our community, I think, has been amazing. Businesses were forced to react, be proactive, refocus, react, be proactive, refocus, wash, rinse, repeat. It seems like we're on that cycle, and we're not out of it yet. But they've done this multiple times. from outdoor dining to creating PPE technologies and everything in between. They were and are resilient. Expansions continued. Castile Bottling's new facility in the industrial park is underway. The steel is up. Unique Wire, a digital forensics technology company, is rapidly growing in downtown McMinnville. Colvin Court road extension has opened up additional industrial land in the industrial park. Relocations persisted. World-renowned impressionist painter Erin Hansen moved her entire operation from Southern California to McMinnville. Her studio and facility are brand new and opening very soon. Winery manufacturing, winery storage, distribution, a rapidly growing local apparel headquarters site search, food processing, medical equipment manufacturing are all projects that we are dealing with currently right now. Workforce needs identified. Our Works internship program, we're in our 9th year on that, is back to pretty close to pre-pandemic levels of involvement. And the innovation environment continues to grow. Co-working space, Granary Row on Lafayette, 16 plus commercial building permits in 2021. It's the first week of March. That's an astonishing number. And an additional 50 plus business consults that we've had over the last year for new startups. There are certainly still issues to overcome. We recognize that, but this entire community is working on it. So it makes McMinnville special, and also what makes our work and the things that we get to do at the Chamber, at MEDP, at Visit McMinnville, and McMinnville Downtown Association, and the city. It's a challenge that we're grateful to have. Joya, everybody, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you got any questions after this or just want to talk about what's going on and what's happening, please feel free to send me an email, give me a phone call. Happy to talk, discuss more about McMinnville. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate the partnership that the Chamber has had with MEDP over all the many years, and all the work that you and your folks are doing, your staff, because it's so important to the growth of our certainly our community and our economy. So thank you for all that you do. And I am remiss if I don't mention my 2 fabulous staff as well, Holly and Rhonda, because you know, if you're going to do good things, surround yourself with great people. So I appreciate both of them. They keep me on the straight and narrow as well. Anyway, all righty. So I am going to turn it over now to why we are here today to Mr. Patrick O'Connor, and take it away, Patrick. And I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, and you can launch into your presentation. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Joya, for having me here today. So as Joya mentioned, I work for the Oregon Employment Department. I'm one of 8 regional economists that we have spread around the state. And so the area that I cover is kind of south of Portland, north of Eugene, I guess you'd say. So I cover Yamhill County, Marion, Polk, and then Lynn and Benton County as well. I live down in Corvallis here, where the nice rainbow, that's my backyard. And so I lived here with my beautiful wife, who, here's the McMinnville connection. My wife was born and raised in McMinnville. And so I was smart enough to marry a McMinnville girl, and was married at St. Barnabas Church. And that's kind of my McMinnville connection. So I always like reconnecting here with the McMinnville crowd. Well, let me get my screen share here. I've worked with the employment department for almost 20 years now, so I'm a experienced economist for sure. Get the right thing to share here. Okay, that's it. Let's get it going here. There's the. Oh, don't jump on me there. Okay, now we got it where it's moving right. Perfect. So we'll look a little bit statewide and then look at Yamhill County as well, just to see where we do have some differences. You know, one of the craziest thing about this recession and is just how consistent it has been throughout most areas, just because, you know, we're all under the same situation in terms of COVID-19. And it's, I know who want, you know, we've only been talking about it for a year, but it is certainly the driving force about this recession, and in a way that's so unusual compared to prior recessions. It's similar in terms of, you know, businesses struggle, people lose jobs. That human suffering is similar in terms of recession, but it's so different in terms of just this one factor driving everything. You know, in normal recessions, there would be something that needs a correction in the market. You know, whether it was in the Great Recession having a housing bubble that needed a correction, whether it was back in the dot-com era where we had a bubble in the stock market that certainly needed a correction, and where, as economists would say, you know, scarce resources needed to be reallocated, and that comes with job loss and businesses closing and new opportunities for other ones. The thing that's so crazy about this recession is that there's no reason to think that as of February 2020, as we were all going about our normal lives and having near record low unemployment rates in Oregon, and having a long economic expansion that we've been having in Oregon and nationally, there was no reason to think that we had a misallocation of resources. You know, we didn't have a bubble in the sense that something needed to be corrected. And it's one of the unusual things. It's not that we all spontaneously decided overnight that we didn't want to go to restaurants, didn't want to go to concerts, sporting events, didn't want to travel anywhere. So it's, I think it's one of the most unusual aspects of having a recession driven by the pandemic. Just looking at the initial losses here when COVID hit in March and April, over 285,000 jobs lost. And the thing that kind of struck me in here is that was almost twice all the jobs that we lost during the Great Recession back in 2008, where we lost 150,000 jobs. And you know, that I thought was going to be the recession of our lifetime in terms of job loss, but we saw that just eclipsed in those early months. And in terms of the counties that saw the greatest loss, we're going to see this. If you're heavy in leisure hospitality, that's kind of the indicative point. And so it was the North Coast, it was Central Oregon, and we'll see that. I'm not going to look at the national data, but we certainly saw that nationally, that Nevada, Hawaii, you know, real tourism dependent states are where we saw the highest unemployment rates and the greatest job loss. Just looking by county, just kind of another way of looking at it here. We see those coastal counties on the bottom, and the black line kind of shows what the initial job loss was there just in the first couple months of the spring of 2020. And then the light blue line kind of shows where we are now as of the end of 2020 in terms of job loss. I noted there that statewide, we've regained 37% of the jobs that were lost during the springtime. Yamhill County, just similar, just slightly better there at 39%. You know, one interesting thing and another unusual thing compared to normal recessions, at least certainly any recessions during our lifetime have hit the rural counties harder, and Metro Portland hasn't been hit as hard. Really different in this situation, where Portland, in particular the Tri-County areas, have been hit the hardest. We don't have a specific one for Yamhill County. I can tell you Yamhill County, we're down about a little more than 9%. So we more closely resemble the Willamette Valley in terms of job loss, and not as much what we saw in the Portland's Tri-County area. I'm going to go through these real quick. Just some key facts from our most recent statewide numbers. Our unemployment rate did tick up in December, up to 6.4%, but still slightly below the U.S. rate. And also job loss, lost 1.4% of the statewide jobs, compared to the U.S. didn't have nearly that loss. Obviously, a fair amount of this came with the restrictions having to be tightened down again in terms of dining. So Oregon's total non-farm payroll, we lost 25,000 jobs total in December. And we could see that was basically almost all within leisure and hospitality, which was down 28,600 jobs in December. So definitely where those losses occurred. In Yamhill County, not nearly as much. We did see the unemployment rate tick up to 5.6%, with similar gain to what we saw statewide. But in terms of job loss, whether my estimates didn't capture it properly, but we didn't seem to see quite as much as we did statewide, where it was pretty flat in December. And Yamhill County as a whole just lost 10 jobs during December, following the revised loss of 80 jobs in November. Overall, prior to that, we'd seen 6 consecutive months of gains from May up until that little slip in November. So, and as I mentioned previously, we're down 9.2% over the year. So about 3,200 jobs in Yamhill County that were down during the pandemic. And similar to the state, the U.S. everywhere, leisure and hospitality has been the hardest hit industry, with 1,200 jobs less than we had a year ago, which is a 31% decline. So just a quick one here, just kind of to show where the peaks were in terms of unemployment, looking back in past recessions here. We can see that kind of the high water mark, both in the early 80s recession and in the Great Recession, was just below 12%. In April there, we peaked out at almost 15%. I think that's going to, I just was in a meeting earlier this morning where we were looking at revisions as we got to the end of the year. And that's going to come down just a little bit, like maybe 1%, but still, 13% is still a real high water mark, something that we have not seen. But it has come down rapidly, cut itself back down to still certainly high compared to where we were prior to the recession, but it's come down from double digits relatively quickly. Yamhill County, we're pretty easy in terms of we don't deviate that far from Oregon's statewide unemployment rate. We can see that our peak wasn't quite as high. It was just around 13% for Yamhill County at the peak, but it's back down, say, kind of to that normal range as well. In terms, this is an interesting one. Prior to the recession, we actually had more of the people that were unemployed in Oregon. It was due to them just being new to the workforce, getting back in. We had more of that than we had people who were unemployed due to the loss of a job. Obviously, during COVID, that has flipped around quite a bit, where now 2/3 of the people that are unemployed, it's due to job loss, and roughly a little less than 1/3 that would be people that are new, trying to get back in the workforce, or just brand new to the workforce period. In terms of duration, obviously initially we saw a huge increase in terms of short-term unemployed. The reason I put this down isn't so much not surprising that the numbers come down in terms of that short-term unemployed as things have dragged on, but the rise in terms of long-term unemployed is something that's crept up just at the end of 2020. Not nearly what we saw during the Great Recession back in 2010 there, where you can see it was almost 100,000 people. That's just certainly a concern for labor economists watching out. Just as people spend longer time sidelined, it really ends up being an impediment to them getting back in the workforce. Whether that's a stigma, where employers look at that and think, "Whoa, boy, this person's been out for a year. There must be something wrong, damaged goods, whatever it is." But statistically, as people spend longer times unemployed, they definitely struggle to regain employment. So that's something that we're watching carefully at this point. Something early on, and it kind of surprised me, to be quite honest, that it's come down that men and women in Oregon are both at 6.4% for unemployment. We can see initially that women shot up higher in terms of unemployment, having a higher unemployment rate, and had a decent gap there. I'm kind of surprised that that's narrowed, and I think part of this is that our surveys are do a great job at picking up the labor force statistics that they're meant to get, but they weren't necessarily designed with a pandemic in mind. And I just know anecdotally from family, friends, acquaintances, that it seems like especially with kids with not having in person school, there's been a lot of parents, and I'm going to say disproportionately women, that have been impacted, that have, I think, had to drop out of the labor force, that don't necessarily get captured in these numbers, because if you're not actively searching for work, then you don't get captured in this. So I do think that this recession, in particular, I say with the kids, has impacted women more severely than men, and I think more so than what we're capturing here. I think the flip side of that is going to be, when we do get things under control from COVID and get kids back in school, you'd expect a large number of those people want to work, but are just in a situation during COVID that it's not possible or not plausible to be working. In terms of age groups of unemployed here, it jumped up for all age groups in 2020. And like normal recessions, though, we see younger workers take the biggest hit in terms of the biggest jump in unemployment. More experienced workers, although it went up for them, don't see as large of a jump as we do for the younger workers. Prior to this, we saw record low unemployment actually for young workers, compared to what we've seen over the last 20 years. So that just kind of underlines what a competitive, tight labor market we were prior to COVID outbreak. This is something that doesn't happen very frequently, that we see our labor force shrinking. It's something that we saw during the Great Recession there, as you see that dip, and it's obviously been quick and a little more chaotic during during COVID here in the last year. A sharp decline, but we've seen that bounce back up quite a bit. As I say, I still think that I'm not sure how much we're capturing some of the people that have been sidelined, say due to school being done virtually. I think that's something that we're not totally picking up. Labor force participation. This is something that's been a long-term challenge for Oregon and nationally, and something that we're seeing. We saw it during the Great Recession, a big decline. Part of that was due to people losing their jobs, young folks not engaging in the workforce. But then about half of the story is demographic, as baby boomers are aging out of the workforce and retiring, for which I would say is a good reason, but it does continue to impact us where we have a lower percentage of people working in the labor force than we historically have had in recent decades. We obviously saw this jump around 2020 with a lot of chaos. How that plays out long term and how many people really wanted to be out of the labor force versus how many are going to re-engage here once we get COVID under control, I think will be one of the questions moving forward. A couple quick slides here. I'll go through these pretty quickly, but interesting just to see for Yamhill County how quickly that job loss came, where even though we thought the Great Recession was a rather severe and quick recession, it took 2 years, over 2 years, for us to really hit the bottom there, where this one was just literally overnight that we were there. Say we've bounced back, we've added almost four out of the 10 jobs lost, but we can see that we're still at a deeper spot there, down over 9% than we ever saw during the Great Recession, where I think the overall for Yamhill County, our low spot was down maybe about 8%. This is just a statewide look in terms of leisure hospitality, just how different it is for our restaurants and hotels. In a normal recession, they certainly suffer and have some slight downturn as people are not going out spending money due to recession, but nothing like restaurants have experienced during this. Certainly an unprecedented situation for them. Statewide leisure and hospitality down 40%. As I said, for Yamhill County, only 31%. Part of that, and this is back to like the metro areas suffering more. I think of some of the things that would normally be going on in Portland that have, in addition to the normal restaurants, you don't have people going in there to work, doing the telecommute coming in from the suburbs. And you don't have events. I was watching the Trailblazers last night and just realizing no one going to those events. No one going up to concerts in Portland. You can see why for Portland it's been maybe even a little more severe, where that's they have some extra leisure and hospitalities beyond the normal hotels and restaurants. So manufacturing, a big important part of Yamhill County. People don't always think of it as a big manufacturing county, but it really has one of the largest shares of manufacturing as a share of total employment of any county in Oregon. So far, manufacturing down 7.1% statewide here. And then for Yamhill County, we got hit a little bit harder here. So down 9.2%, where we haven't got hit quite as hard in terms of leisure and hospitality. We've unfortunately kind of made up for it with some extra losses in manufacturing. I don't have the details locally, but I do have them at the statewide level, just that it really has been across the board in terms of not too many parts of manufacturing spared. Everything from wood products to some extent. The big one certainly in terms of transportation and primary metals, which in Oregon is a very strong relationship to aerospace. And obviously with airlines just trying to keep the doors open, you can imagine just how many orders for planes have been canceled and cut back during the COVID era. Construction is a funny one to compare. I put this on here just to compare it with the Great Recession, where obviously a housing bubble exploding there, where we lost 1 in 3 jobs in statewide in construction. Here we saw just this a 10% decline initially, but almost back up to where it was before. So certainly this recession, not anything to do with the housing bubble is what this is certainly showing. Here statewide, just a look where we also have the wages attached to it to see obviously some of the lower pay industries that have taken the biggest hits. And really the only industry that we've seen statewide that's added jobs here was transportation, warehousing, and utilities. And warehousing is really where it is. It's not that utilities have gone through the roof. Warehousing is where we find things like, say, Amazon warehouses. So that's been the big thing in terms of delivery and people getting everything online. That's certainly been one of the growth spots here during COVID, as we've all gone to having things delivered remotely. Looking at how that's been for Yamhill County, really kind of a similar story, other than no Amazon distribution center there in Yamhill County. Slight gains in federal government, which that's it for Yamhill County. That's obviously driven by the prison up in Sheridan. Information, and those are just minor gains, maybe 20 or 30 jobs for that in financial activities, but a couple industries that certainly have weathered it, and say similar to everything else, our biggest loss is leisure and hospitality, and then manufacturing, and that educational and health services. I should point out that that's private education, so that's really Linfield, and not any public K through 12 would be caught up in local government, where we have also seen losses with, and that's been not so much your normal faculty teachers that have been lost in the local government K through 12 numbers. It could be school bus drivers not needing substitute teachers at nearly the same level. So it's been that, I think, more than kind of full-time FTE being cut at K through 12 at this point. And obviously health services, that was kind of a surprise to me, just how quickly, you think with COVID, we'd be hiring people, needing more people in healthcare, but with the elective surgeries being put on hold, it was interesting how quickly you don't need people in the accounts payable department. So quite a few losses in healthcare that are still need to have not returned. This is a statewide look, just looking that, as I say, the one thing, and it's certainly a point of concern, is the job losses that have come have definitely disproportionately been in lower paying industries. For medium to high wage workers, it really, COVID's impacted all our lives, but in terms of jobs, and employment wise, we haven't seen that nearly to the same extent in medium high wage workers like we have in low wage workers. So inequality is really, it was an issue. If you were to ask me prior to COVID, was inequality a kind of a big issue? That's one of the things, despite record low unemployment, that I would have said, yeah, that's an issue moving forward. And unfortunately, COVID has really just kind of poured gasoline on top of that and exacerbated that issue. Here's some data that's outside our normal issue, or our normal data sources, where they're able to really look at job loss by the workers themselves, not kind of beyond the industries, but by individual workers. And this one really shows where we've actually seen higher wage jobs up more than 5%. Medium wage jobs just basically back to where they were prior to COVID, but more than 1 in 3 low wage jobs disappeared at this point. And that's as I say, that's one of my definitely big concerns about this inequality just being so exacerbated. Just real quickly, looking at employer responses from our survey, where we do survey Oregon employers, and in terms of how have they had to curtail operations during COVID restriction. It's here. 6% of respondents in the fall survey reported a closure or curtailment due to COVID-19, and that compared with 7% during the summer, but 18% back in spring. So that's good to see it improving, but still impacting a significant share of businesses, I would say as well. and yeah, no surprise there, employers in the Portland metro area and North Coast really reported the highest share of businesses being impacted. That's back to that leisure and hospitality issue. Just in terms of the vacancies, actually kind of a normal thing that we would see. Healthcare, just because it's such a big industry, it almost always is on the list with the most vacancies listed. Now, this is, of course, the real question that everyone waits for. What is the future? And Oregon, long term, we've been a growth state. We're an in-migration state, and we have outpaced the U.S. growth over the long run. That's for sure. Now, that being said, our road tends to be a little bumpier. We mentioned talking about Yamhill County in particular with the big manufacturing base. Oregon overall has more than our fair share of manufacturing, and that's not a bad thing. The one thing that does, though, is in recessions, we tend to feel it harder than the national trend. So in terms of when there's losses nationally, we take those hits more than the nation, but then we grow faster in the expansion time. So we're a little more of a roller coaster. A good analogy that Tom Potowski, that old state economist, used to say is that if the U.S. gets a cold, Oregon gets pneumonia in terms of recession. So that's historically how it plays out. As I say, over the long run, even though we have more of a roller coaster, we do outpace the long-term U.S. trend. So this, I wanted to look specifically here at how we've been so far in COVID. So we started here where we're both tied at the beginning of 2020 here, and we see that for this recession, it's actually matched up almost the same in terms of the depth of the loss, as I say, just back to, because we're all being impacted by COVID in such similar ways. At this point, the U.S. has slightly outpaced our trend. I think that part of that is kind of that manufacturing story weighing out. Part of that can be obviously that we've been more restricted than some states in terms of reopening as well. So I think a combination of both those have us where we're maybe a little bit below the trend line, but still pretty similar, more so than what we would have seen in past recessions. So here's the forecast moving forward from our friends at the Office of Economic Analysis. That the one thing that we expect is that basically, if we can get COVID under control, we really do expect a much faster recovery than we've seen in the past, where we think we're going to be back up to the point that we were at prior to COVID by middle of 2023. So a 3-year turnaround. Got to remember, in the Great Recession here, it took almost 7 years for us to get back to that point. So the good news, I guess this is the rainbow, but behind me here, is that if we can get COVID under control, we really do expect a fast recovery. One of the things that I don't deal with the revenue side nearly as much, but with having so many high wage, medium wage workers that have not been as impacted, other than we're all locked up and can't go anywhere, is that savings rates have just gone through the roof during COVID. And so the thought with a lot of economists is if we can handle the healthcare side, we should have a lot of pent up demand of people who have kept their jobs, kept on having money, and have had nowhere to spend it. So whether it's going out to restaurants, whether it's going on travel, we do expect, when we get the health side under control, to see some rapid growth coming out of this. Certainly more than we've seen in any prior recessions that we've seen in my lifetime. In terms of where we expect the jobs to come, this is just kind of looking at the next year, and it very much is, probably to no surprise, the industries where we've seen the losses. Leisure and hospitality leading the way, local government, which a mix of K through 12 and that, and some non-K through 12 losses that have been there that are coming back. and that's so it really is just looking at where those losses are and seeing those industries coming back, because back to our point earlier that we're talking about, we had no reason to think that consumers didn't want those services that we had prior to COVID. And so that's certainly how we're seeing it come back, that we're expecting it. The one thing, assumption, and I'll kind of end with this, and it's a key assumption, and Lord knows, as economists, we're not epidemiologists, but one of the things that certainly has to happen is we're assuming that the pandemic continues to wane, and that we're able to see the economy continue to reopen. And I think importantly, probably something that I haven't spoken of, or that economists haven't spoken about enough, is that seeing households feel increasingly confident in their ability to safely go back and resume activity. My parents' winter down in Tucson, where the economy is much more open, but I can tell you, they have no confidence that they're going out for meals either. So that's going to be kind of those three keys are important. And as I say, we're not healthcare experts at all, but that's certainly one of the assumptions and caveats of seeing this, what we hope to be a quick return to a normal economic activity. I know I'll leave with this. I like to think of things at a household level, sometimes more than the big picture level. And I know that for us, our household will be back to normal when we go to Disney World. I have an 11-year-old that has been after me since before COVID came. When are we going to Disney World? And so when the O'Connor family goes up to PDX and goes down to Orlando to be with 50,000 strangers arm to arm, that's our measure for when we'll be back to normal.
Thank you, Patrick. That was great and super interesting. We have some questions, so I'd like
Perfect.
to go to the chat. And so our first question, let me just make sure it was our first question. Yes. Based on unemployment numbers, why do you think there are still so many businesses unable to find employees?
It is an interesting one, because I've certainly seen the help wanted signs out there, and I think part of it is some of the places I've seen are maybe not super, or low to medium wage jobs where one could be in the line of fire. So I think some people maybe avoiding COVID still. I certainly. It was crazy. As an economist, normally I don't deal with people with unemployment claims, but I'm sure as you guys have read in the paper, I mean, it was just unheard of time. And so I certainly ended up helping people on their unemployment claims. And so it could be, I helped one gentleman who was in his 60s and working at Fred Meyer that just was in a high risk category, and it was a part-time job supplementing his Social Security, and he needed the job, but needed to be alive more. So that's someone who I'm sure has been sidelined. I would think he someone who wanted to work but was not going to be out there until certainly he got vaccinated and could get back. So there's those that have stood on the sidelines for those reasons. As I say, I wish we had a better, the one number I wish we had a better measure on is somehow how many parents have been sidelined temporarily with the schools being closed. I mean, I've dealt with a few unemployed folks that had their kids at home. They were home. They tried to get back to work. The kids were flunking out of school. They had to quit their job again. I mean, it's tough at the personal level to hear some of these households just how much parents with younger kids are struggling to make it through, and the human cost is tough. I guess my best answer to that is you would hope as we can get past this healthcare thing that we'll see people that have been sidelined that for whatever reason are not actively looking for work right now, that they'll be getting back into the labor force and getting back to some sense of normal.
Great, thank you. Okay, that was an interesting question, and certainly there are probably many factors that impact why someone doesn't go back to work, right? And the childcare issue is huge for our communities, because when you can't send your child to either school or to childcare, it really does impact your ability to go to work. So great answer. Thank you. Next question, does food manufacturing include wine and beer production?
They sometimes we wrap them together. They actually are they're part of their own beverage manufacturing, and so that we haven't seen that hit. The big hit statewide in food manufacturing, I'll just say, was Norpac closing up. That was a lot of jobs in Salem. So I'd say overall food manufacturing has been pretty stable, and certainly beverage manufacturing has been stable. You know, the thing obviously, we'll talk wine in terms of Yamhill County. Those darn grapes, they come in whether it's COVID or not. So you're really locked in by what you're doing, and you're going to be making grapes into wine regardless. So we haven't seen that part jump around. I know the wineries have been impacted by tasting rooms being limited, but in terms of the head count of people working in there, the big part of that food manufacturing thing was certainly the closure of Norpac in Salem.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. Another question with regard to that, do you know what the percentage of the information marked as manufacturing is wine, beer, and craft beverage?
Ooh, well, in Yamhill County, I'm gonna guess about a quarter. I could get back with a more exact answer, but I think it's roughly a quarter of the county's manufacturing would be in there in beverage, somewhat beer, but certainly the bigger part wine.
Okay, thank you. There's a rather personal question here, and I'll let you maybe send an email to Starla, who works for the paper. Who is your wife, the McMinnville native? So I'll let you decide how you want to share that information.
Her Stephanie Moore is her maiden name. So her dad was a partner at all the insurance folks there. No, on the spot I can't think of them there.
Okay. That's all right. Thank you.
Hagen Hamilton Insurance. There we go.
You go.
Get the marketing in for them.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, good plug for Hagen Hamilton. How does the department define a job? Does that include a 40-hour week? Wait a minute. Does that include a 4-hour per week childcare worker at a church?
It could. Yeah, it could. It's definitely anyone. If you work 1 hour, you're gonna. Now, if you were just a volunteer, not getting paid, it wouldn't include volunteers. But anyone who is getting paid for whether you're working 1 hour a week or 60 hours a week, would check the box as being employed.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great. Someone wants to know if they can go to Disney World with you.
Sure. We'll get a better package deal.
Though, right?
That's right.
I do have a question. How many businesses has Oregon lost due to the closures? Do you have an idea?
It's a lagging indicator. I was speaking with our other fellow economists at Office of Economic Analysis, and we were focusing really in on leisure hospitality where the big hits are. And it was interesting that to this point they're going off OLCC. Businesses doing their annual re-registration. And at this point it was down about 5%, which is now just because you're not out of business doesn't mean things are going great. I don't want to minimize it, obviously, for all the restaurants out there, how tough things are. But we were kind of surprised to only see 5% number. That's a lot lower than, when we've seen 30-40% of the workers out. We've certainly heard people pontificating that, it could be as many as 30% of restaurants and bars, that would go under during this time. And at least at this point, according to the OLCC records, it hasn't dropped off nearly that much. So hopefully that's a promising sign. I know it's not promising if you're one of the 5% of the businesses that are that are closed. That doesn't that very helpful. But so far it hasn't been as dire as some of the early predictions.
Excellent, thank you. And once again, I imagine that there are factors that help those businesses, perhaps with PPP and EIDL loans and things like that. This certainly went on so much longer than I think everyone had expected.
They have, and not to. I know we need to stay away from politics, but with the PPP, I think of it, just in a non-pandemic time, we pay farmers in the Midwest as our normal policy to not grow crops sometime. To think of paying our restaurants to not serve food during a global pandemic shouldn't be a crazy leap, because we know that these are businesses, as I say, that it wasn't consumers deciding that they didn't want to support them anymore, right? It's the pandemic driving this thing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you for saying that. My last question: how many of the added jobs, I think it was 48,000 you had there, are those jobs that were lost and we expect to get back, or are those new jobs that we expect to get?
I guess these are jobs that certainly they're coming in industries that lost them. So they're jobs that we're expecting to get back. It's not like we're figuring that's out at an individual level. It's really done at an industry level. I think that's the tougher thing for individuals. Some people, if your job disappears, you got to get looking real quickly, right, to make money come in. So that at an industry level, we're expecting those to be kind of jobs that were there before coming back, whether they're filled by the same people as before. Probably not that way. It's a more complicated piece.
Yeah. And I would imagine that there are industries that may not come back. Do you see an industry not coming back?
Well, I do wonder about some of the brick and mortars. I mean, I mentioned about the growth of Amazon here. That's something that was seemed like a longer term thing, that longer term trend that was certainly going, that really got accelerated during this. You think of well, my parents. Older folks are not necessarily ones excited to get on the computers and start doing all this. They'd rather go down to their local drugstore and get things this way, to find out that, oh my goodness, I can just order my drugs online and have them delivered here to my, so things like that wouldn't happen or would have taken a much longer time, I think certainly got accelerated. And I wish I had the crystal ball to say, but I would suspect some of that will continue, and as people found that convenient. So I think that's a concern. Certainly we saw some of the clothing stores with bankruptcies going on, and so that's, I think a number of brick and mortars would be a concern. The restaurant. I know I'm going to go back to my normal restaurant dining. I know, just from some chefs that I've seen talking that obviously know a whole lot more than I do about it, they seem to think that there had been kind of a longer term trend that was going to be coming, that would have been more takeout, these, what they call them, ghost restaurants, where they don't have a storefront, but delivery. So but I think that went from where they were looking at that as a 10, 15, 20 year horizon, how much that's accelerated during this period, and how much that's going to stay versus, I know I'm still going to want to go out with my family and friends and have a nice meal as much as I did before. So I'm not sure how.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I think there definitely is a market, because eating in a restaurant is an experience, right? I mean, there's there's a whole thing that happens when you're sitting there. It's not just grabbing the food, going home and eating it at your kitchen table or in your car, as some people do.
Right.
There's a market for that, but definitely sitting at a table and enjoying being served and experiencing that, because it's not just about the food, it's about the whole experience. I think
Right.
really important. So thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I don't have any other questions. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask Patrick? My goodness, he answered all the questions that you had, and he solved all the problems of the world. And we are grateful for that. Anyway, thank you, Patrick. Thank you for your presentation. That was super interesting. I took some great notes, and I appreciate all the great information that you have shared and all the work that you do. And thank you for helping all those folks that were out there that needed assistance for their, unemployment. I know that was hard for a lot of folks to deal with. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll let you know what our next business support series is. Thank you to MEDP for their support and partnership on this, and of course to Mac Water and Light and Recology for being our sponsors. Have a wonderful day, and thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.